Hey guys, this is Adam D'Angeli for the Michigan Caregivers Association, an organization supporting the interests of caregivers and growers across Michigan, independent caregivers who are currently facing legislation that would effectively put us all out of business, except for large corporate institutions that are looking to move in and take over the market. So we're going to talk a little bit about what this means. There was a rally in Lansing this past week after legislation was introduced. We're going to look at that legislation carefully so you all understand exactly what it is doing, and then we're going to talk about strategies for how to stop it from happening. So let's get right to it. There are three bills: House Bill 5300, let me center this, 5301 and 5302, but they're all what's called tie-barred together. What happens when you're looking to amend more than one law, you have to have more than one bill. So that's why there are three bills, but they're all doing essentially one thing. And most of what that is doing, we will see in House Bill 5301. But as I say, they're basically all one bill, although there are three introduced by three different lawmakers. And you can see, as it says here, these are the three main sponsors of the three bills: T.C. Clements, Jim Lilly, and Richard Steenland. And we're going to look at them in just a moment, but first let's just understand what these bills are and how they work. Now, if you've never read legislation in Michigan before, there's a few things you need to know. First off, what they actually do is they reproduce every section of the law that they're amending. So everything you see here that's not in boldface, like everything on this page, this is all what the law currently says. So none of this is new. But when you go down till you find something that's in boldface, that is what they're adding, and what they're removing, they're crossing out. So you can see on the screen there's some renumbering going on because they're adding in this paragraph defining licensed specialty medical grower, which they'll refer to in the Medical Marijuana Act, which is 5301. That's going to be amending that. So what you see as you scroll through this is mostly what they're doing is adding in these references. So wherever it said this means a licensee that they're adding in from a primary registered caregiver or licensed specialty medical grower. And by the way, we'll look more closely at a distinction here that's very important. It says here registered primary caregiver or licensed specialty medical grower. So there's a distinction between licensed and registered, and those are huge differences. A registration just means you're checking in with the government, you're putting your name on file. A license means the government is granting you a privilege. And always that comes with a lot of conditions, but the most important thing is that the government can revoke those privileges. It essentially makes sure that every single specialty medical grower, a term we'll be looking at in just a moment here, is not just registered with the government, but is actually licensed and has permission to go about their operations. And we'll see what that means when we get to 5301. But that's pretty much all that 5300 is doing, is adding in these references throughout this other law. But there are a few things in here that are somewhat interesting. For example, in this paragraph, it adds in a grower license authorizes the transfer of marijuana from a licensed specialty medical grower to a grower only by means of a secure transporter, i.e. an armored truck. And the marijuana regulatory agency may establish a limit on the amount of marijuana that a licensed specialty medical grower may transfer to a grower. Marijuana transferred from a licensed specialty medical grower to a grower shall not be transferred to a person licensed under the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. So a small thing, but still somewhat interesting. What they're doing is imposing a barrier on these licensed specialty growers. And the name of the game is licensure. What they really want to do is, number one, restrict what someone who's not a licensed specialty medical grower can do, and then also restrict what the specialty medical growers can do to the extent that it prevents competition from becoming a fellow licensed specialty medical grower. And we'll see how they go about doing that. So that's mostly what this bill does. It's not the biggest thing. You see here again, they're mostly just adding in references, adding in the location at which the licensed specialty medical grower is authorized to cultivate or manufacture marijuana, and so on. So that's 5300. In itself, it doesn't do much, but again, it's tie-barred with 5301 and 5302. They're really all effectively one piece of legislation, just in three separate parts. But 5301 is doing a lot of things. And in fact, I've jumped right down to the most important thing from the perspective of an independent primary caregiver. It's drastically changing what they can do right in this paragraph. It's buried on page 30 of the bill. And here's what it says. And again, remember, the boldface is what they're adding. The regular font is what the existing law said. So what it used to say was a primary caregiver may assist not more than 5 qualifying patients with medical use of marijuana, period. And that was it. What they will change the law to say is before March 21st, 2022, a primary caregiver may assist not more than 5 registered qualifying patients. And throughout this, you'll see they're adding in registered where before it did not exist. And here again, a registered qualifying patient. They're trying to lock everything down. But more importantly, on or after March 21st, 2022, a primary caregiver may assist only 1 registered qualifying patient with the registered qualifying patient's medical use of marijuana. So they're knocking down the number of patients you can have from 5 down to 1, which is effectively making it impossible to earn a living doing this. So that is the huge thing right there. 80% of your business is gone. But there's other stuff in here too. And the most of it is defining what exactly a specialty grower is, because they are going to have the ability to grow a whole lot more marijuana than you can. And we'll see exactly how that's going to work. So some of this language mirrors what there is elsewhere. So all this stuff, I mean, you can argue with it, but it's not much different from what the law already says about other growers. But more importantly is the privileges it confers upon the licensed specialty medical growers and the barriers to entry it puts up. This is a big one right here, this paragraph that says the Marijuana Regulatory Agency may promulgate rules or emergency rules to implement this act pursuant to the Administrative Procedures Act. What that means is they're giving bureaucrats blanket authority to impose all the regulations that they want. And of course, the bureaucrats are not elected. They're typically appointed by the governor, serve at the governor's pleasure, and of course, typically cater to special interests because it's the nature of bureaucrats. So that's an important one. Let's see, what else do we have here? Expanding the power of the Marijuana Regulatory Agency. May do any of the following to exercise its duties: conduct investigations, contested case hearings, issue subpoenas, administer oaths. And here's an important part. This is where this whole part in bold here is really where they're defining what the specialty growers are. And importantly, a specialty medical grower is a license. It is a revocable privilege granted by the state. It is not a property right, does not create or vest a right, title, franchise, or any other property interest, and it's not transferable. So again, it's all about licensure, because through licensure, you can limit competition. And that's what they aim to do here. So for example, a licensed specialty grower must submit everything to testing. So before a sale or transfer, marijuana has to be tested by a safety compliance facility under the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act in compliance with the testing standards then in effect for marijuana sold by provisioning centers licensed under the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. So again, it's all about licensing. It's all about limiting competition. And really with every industry, it's all the same thing. The more regulations you have, the more difficult it is to compete. And the large institutions actually like that, because the costs of all this stuff ultimately get transferred onto the consumers. If everybody has to have these safety tests and everything else, it's just a cost of doing business that everybody has. It gets passed on. It's supply and demand. The more expensive a supply is, the higher the price goes. So those costs will be passed on to the consumers, but most importantly, subjecting everybody to all the stuff in here. There's a $500 application fee, and the license is only good for 1 year, so that's $500 a year it costs. And then again, everything else here, all of this registration, all of this licensure is all about making it more and more and more difficult for someone who is an independent grower to do business. But again, they've said in the other piece of this that independent producers can only have 1 patient, not 5. So they've effectively destroyed their business. And there's lots of other little rules in here. For example, independent growers can no longer grow on a shared property. They have to all be separate. There's rules about enclosures. Has to be an enclosed, locked facility at the location the primary caregiver provided on its application for registration. Only one primary caregiver may cultivate or manufacture marijuana at the same location. Overages can't be transferred to anybody. So everything you see that's in bold is new. So if you want to read this bill in detail, beyond what we've already talked about, it's at legislature.mi.gov. But those are the basics of it. Those are the biggest parts of it. What they're effectively doing is making it so that a large corporate entity, and of course, this is all coming from the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association. Here, let me recenter my screen here. This is the lobbyist for the large institutional corporations that want to take over the cannabis industry. And of course, as you all know, the history of marijuana is that it was illegal for many, many years. It took countless hours of activism. Many people's lives were destroyed by law enforcement over what I think people agree was a fundamentally unjust prohibition on cannabis. Now that activists have put in countless hours to legalize marijuana, first for medicinal purposes and now for recreational purposes, now big corporations see the money in it and want to get into the business. But in order to be successful, they have to crush all of the competition. And that's what this is really all about. So they hide behind safety. They talk all about how important this is, but really what it's all about is making it harder to compete. And everybody knows that cannabis is an industry that has evolved over decades, and what really ensures quality is competition, is freedom and choice, and that customers can go anywhere else because there's lots of competitors in the industry, and that is what leads to the product being safe. But again, what this is really all about is removing competition. So all this having been said, now the question is, what can we do to stop these bills? So let me first talk about where the bills are. They are in the House Regulatory Reform Committee. As of now, they are not scheduled for hearings, but they could be at any time. So you can kill a bill in any stage of the legislative process. And right now, this bill is at the beginning. It's just been introduced in the House. So if the bill never gets brought up for a hearing in committee, that's likely to be the end of it. And that's why it's so important that people contact their lawmakers, voice their opposition, let them know this is something that they're going to vigorously oppose if lawmakers vote to support it. So you can see on the screen here the members of the committee. And first, we'll talk a little bit about organizing pressure on lawmakers. There's a lot of people out there that have the perception that the system is broken and money is all that matters in politics, and we have to donate to the politicians more than the other side does. And I don't believe any of that, frankly. Yes, money is important in politics, but the thing that politicians think about more than anything else is the next election. And those that are in what we call swing seats are in constant fear of alienating any substantial percentage of their electorate. For example, if people in a district where a lawmaker such as Richard Steenland in Roseville votes yes on these bills, he's a sponsor of them, so he likely will no matter what, needs to face serious pushback in his district, which is Roseville. And by the way, he is a freshman Democrat, so he is subject for re-election. He is not term limited. He could face a primary challenger. And if people get involved in that primary challenger's campaign, that puts him in a very difficult position. And of course, people in the general election might say, you know what, I'm not going to vote for this guy. He may be a Democrat and I might be a Democrat, but you know, I don't owe him my vote. And if he votes to take away my liberty, then voting for him would be the worst thing I can do. Because obviously you don't get your agenda if you reward those that vote against it. So let's go through each of these. Roger Houck is the chair of the committee. He represents Isabella County, Mount Pleasant area, parts of Midland County. However, he is in his third term, and I don't believe he is running for state senate, which means he's retiring basically at the end of next year. But there are others who are not so vulnerable, who are more vulnerable. Matt Hall, for example, represents, I think, Battle Creek area. Well, not Battle Creek proper, but southern Calhoun County. He is in his second term seeking re-election. Mike Mueller is in his second term. He's a cop, by the way. His district is southern Genesee County, and I think parts of Oakland County as well. I don't think there's any of Livingston County in it. I think it's all Genesee and Oakland County. Pauline Wenzel's district is Benton Harbor. She's in her second term. T.C. Clements, he's in his first term. I noticed in his biography his dad was a cop. I wonder if maybe that's why he and Richard Steenland were... T.C. Clements was a cop. Steenland's father was a cop. So it's interesting the personalities they have picked for running the legislation. The other sponsor of the bill, by the way, Jim Lilly, chairs the powerful House Rules Committee. He is in his third term, so difficult to pressure. He's a guy who never met a lobbyist he didn't like. Then you've got John DeMoose. He is a freshman. His district is surrounding the Mackinac Bridge, lower and upper peninsula. It's Sault Ste. Marie, St. Ignace, but then I think also going down as far as Petoskey and Harbor Springs in the lower peninsula. Pat Outman, his district is, let's see, let me think. I had it. I'm trying to remember what it is now. Oh, it's Central Michigan area. It's Montcalm and Gratiot counties. Kevin Hertel, his district is St. Clair Shores. He's the minority vice chair, so he's influential. Jewel Jones, unfortunately, he's no longer on this committee. He has been expelled from his committees on account of he got arrested for drunk driving with a firearm, and then more recently tried to smuggle a handcuff key into jail. Not sure how that would have helped him in a cell, but that's what he tried, but he got caught. So anyway, he's in big trouble, and he's no longer on the committee. Tanisha Yancey represents parts of Detroit and I think Harper Woods, Grosse Pointe Shores, so eastern parts of Detroit. Alex Garza, I think, is in his second term now, and his district is Detroit Metro Airport area, Romulus, I think maybe Taylor. Angela Whitwer, she's in a swing district. She's in her second term, and that is Eaton County, so southwest parts of Lansing. And Richard Steenland represents Roseville, and he is a freshman as well. So with all of these people, all of them have growers in their districts that have to be contacted, notified, and engaged, and let them all know they are going to vigorously oppose this legislation, and they're going to organize around this if they vote yes. They're going to cause as much pain for them in the election as they possibly can. That's basically how you influence the legislative process. And that's the way politicians operate. They're subject to pleasure and pain. Pleasure in the form of money, pain in the form of angry voters. And fortunately for us, pain is a lot more affordable to deliver than pleasure. So that's the way this works. We have to reach out to the grassroots. We have to notify the caregivers community of what's going on, and to the greatest extent possible, contact our lawmakers. What matters most to them is how many voters are angry about this. And this is where the community has the ability to get a whole lot of people fired up. This is not a partisan issue. This isn't even really about marijuana, truthfully. This is about a corporate takeover of an industry. And it works the same as in any other industry. There are people in both parties who are on the side of the lobbyists and the big corporations, and there's people within both sides who support independent, local, small businesses. So where any particular politician stands on this, you can't tell just by their party affiliation. And regardless of their party affiliation, what matters most to them is what the political consequences will be. And our mission right now is to prove to them that there will be political consequences for this. So certainly contacting the lawmakers on this committee is important. And of course, if this makes it past the committee, make sure you've already contacted your own state representatives and state senators so that they know how much grassroots pressure will be out there. And that people will be mad. They will lose voters if they do this. That's the message that must be sent. So spread the word. Make sure you sign up at micaregivers.com so you can receive email alerts, because this is essentially a survival battle for the independent grower and caregiver community. It really is that important. What this legislation would do is absolutely put many, many, many people out of business, and it will ultimately result in the corporate takeover of the cannabis industry. And that's not where we want to be. In fact, some further background on the Regulatory Reform Committee. It's not really about removing government regulations or revising regulations. The Regulatory Reform Committee is all about alcohol. It's all about the alcohol industry. And what they have in Michigan is called a 3-tier system. 3 tiers meaning manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. And the Beer and Wine Wholesalers Association is one of the most powerful lobbies in Lansing, and powerful because of how much money they throw around. And that's what this committee is all about. It's considered a plum committee assignment because their members are showered with cash from the alcohol industry. And once they're done taking over the grower and caregiver side of the equation, the distribution chain is coming next. What they want is a system mirrored on the alcohol system, where they have a cushy Lansing lobby of growers and distributors giving politicians money to keep the status quo the same. And the only way we can push back on that is now, while we have a caregiver community that still exists that can mobilize against this. So this is very important, very urgent for everybody to get involved. If you want more information, make sure you sign up for micaregivers.com email alerts and follow them on social media as well, so they can inform you that way as well. And again, spread the word and contact your lawmakers. Those are the priorities. So thanks for everything you do for liberty and for the independent caregiver industry, because it is under serious threat right now. If you have any questions, make sure you contact us at micaregivers.com. Till next time, peace.